Hello there everyone, this is Mr. Brass, and today I'm going to talk to you about Odysseus and the great families of mythology. The story of Odysseus' travels go beyond the Trojan War. Due to angering a bunch of gods who had bets on the other team, Greek fleets would receive trouble. Athena and Poseidon would team up to make any Greek ship sink and blow them off course. This was due also to the Greeks using the wooden horse, which was supposed to be an offering to Athena, so the whole event seemed bad. Odysseus would suffer longer than any other Greeks, as he was left wandering for 10 years being trapped on Ogygia by the nymph Calypso before coming home to see his son grown up. He had been away from home for 20 years. During his coming back from Troy, he had went to the land of lotus eaters with his men whom he had to force back because they ate the lotus, which made them high, and he got into a fight with the Cyclops, which were related to the gods, and started a whole feud with him and Poseidon over that. And Poseidon vowed not to let him come home until he had suffered. He had also had a bag of winds from King Aeolus, which his crew members screwed up and got him into more trouble. Odysseus also dealt with the giant cannibals known as the Lystragons, which destroyed all of Odysseus' ships which Odysseus was in, except the one that Odysseus was in, I could say. He'd go to Ai, the realm of Circe, a dangerous witch whom turned a lot of his men to animals until Odysseus would convince Circe to turn them back. He'd stay for a year before going to the underworld in order to try to get home safer. In said underworld, he'd have to deal with blood-drinking spirits whom he'd have to keep away. He'd also meet Ajax and Achilles there. After that, he'd avoid the sirens by having his crew members plug their ears, while he himself tied himself to the boat so he could hear it himself without causing problems. Lastly, his men would kill the sacred oxen they had got, and Zeus would strike the ship down, killing all the men but Odysseus. It was after floating in the water for a while that he stumbled onto Calypso's island, whom held him there as a love and a prisoner for many years. Odysseus' wife Penelope would remain faithful to her husband despite it being widely assumed Odysseus was dead, and thus would reject so many marriage offers, but the rude and greedy man stayed in her house and refused to leave till she chose one of them, which meant resources were being eaten up, which also annoyed Odysseus' son Telemachus. After 10 years, Athena's anger towards Odysseus faded, and she felt sorry for having caused so much trouble for him and decided to have the Olympians help out. Hermes was sent by Zeus to get Calypso to release Odysseus, which she would, and would get Odysseus to leave the island via a raft. Poseidon would still try to kill Odysseus, but he'd receive help to get safety to land owned by the good people, the Phoceans. He'd become friends with the Nicesians, the daughter of King Alcyoneus, whom would get him help from her parents. Odysseus would tell them and others his stories. Alcyoneus assured him his troubles were over and brought Odysseus home to Ithaca. Athena, disguised as a shepherd lad, would tell him he was in Ithaca. She would reveal herself after a talk and talk to him about the men wanting to marry his wife, and said she'd help him out. Odysseus would finally meet his son Telemachus, whom just came back from Sparta. Odysseus would go back to his house and would see his dog again, who felt like his life was completed after seeing his master after so long. Afterwards, the old dog died. He wouldn't reveal himself to his wife though for a while. Penelope would set up a contest to see who would be her husband. The contest would be whomever could use Odysseus' bow and arrow to shoot an arrow through 12 rings in a line would be her new husband. She knew only Odysseus could do that. Odysseus, still disguised as a poor beggar, got the bow and put the arrow through the rings before turning the arrow on the suitors. The suitors didn't have no weapons, as Odysseus had arranged for them to be taken away, and he blocked the exits. Odysseus and Telemachus would kill all the suitors. Odysseus would reunite with his wife, and all would be well. Now let's talk about the famous families of mythology. First off, let's talk about the cursed house of Atreus. Agamemnon was the commander of the Greek forces and the son of the king Atreus of Mycenae. He'd weathered through the harsh storm that wrecked other ships and came home. As I mentioned earlier, Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia in order to have a safe journey to Troy. Agamemnon was part of a cursed family because his great-grandfather, Tantalus, killed his son and tried to feed him to the gods. Tantalus would be thrown into Tartarus, aka the underworld. Agamemnon, when he came back, it was known that to everyone except maybe Ag himself that there was trouble coming for his actions and vengeance would be given to him. Because of his deeds, his wife Clytemnestra decided to be unfaithful to Ag and took a lover named Augustus, aka Ag's cousin. Ag and his wife would speak, and when everyone was gone, Cly and Augustus ambushed him and stabbed him through the chest with a sword. Cly and Augustus ruled together until Ag's son Orestes killed them both, despite knowing that it would lead to his ruin because he had to avenge his father's murder. He'd become a wanderer, plagued with suffering afterwards, and would later on ask the gods for forgiveness and to be atoned for his sin, something no one in his house had done up to that point. Orestes was acquitted and the curse ended. Next is the story of Oedipus in the house of Thebes. Oedipus is the son of the king of Thebes, Laius. He didn't have a really easy life, as he was left on a mountain as a baby to die in order so he could avoid Apollo's prophecy of him getting killed by his son. Oedipus would be found on the mountain when would be taken in by the king of Corinth, Polybus. Oedipus would be told by Apollo that he would murder his father and marry his mother. Upon hearing that, Oedipus took that to mean he'd murder Polybus, as he assumed that was his dad. He'd leave and become a wanderer, seeking to stop the prophecy from coming true. During his wandering, he would find the Sphinx and solve its riddle of what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 at the noonday, and 3 in the evening, by saying man. With the riddle solved, the Sphinx killed herself, and the Thebians were saved. He was made the king of Thebes and married the dead king's wife, Jocasta. A great plague would happen in the lands, and as Apollo had told, would come only to be cleared if Laius' murder would be punished. Oedipus sought to find who murdered Laius, and found out from the blind prophet Tiresias that Oedipus killed Laius. It turned out that Oedipus had killed Laius when Laius and his 4 attendants tried to force Oedipus on his path. Jocasta brought up how Laius was prophesied to die at the hand of his son, and Oedipus realized the prophecy he had been told, and things came together. Oedipus killed his father, aka Laius, and married his mother, aka Jocasta, and the prophecy was fulfilled. Upon the revelation, Jocasta killed herself and Oedipus gouged out his eyes. Next up is the tale of Procreus and Cepheus, and it's an exciting one. Procreus was the daughter of the king Orestes of Athens, and she married to Cepheus, whom was the grandson of Alius, the king of winds. While their marriage was happy, Cepheus was a lover on the run and became attached to Aura, the goddess of the dawn, and would take a long absence from home. Aura fell in love with him, but Cepheus, while he had feelings for Aurora, couldn't find it in his heart to cheat on Procreus. He loved Procreus too much. Aurora was mad and suggested to Cepheus that his wife isn't as faithful as he is. Cepheus would reasonably get mad at this and sought to prove Procreus would remain faithful to him. He did so by disguising himself as another person, and it was all so well done that no one could believe it was him. Despite all of his advancement and telling her that her husband, aka himself, had forsaken her, she did not budge. She wouldn't cheat. She would never give in to him, but she would be more open to him, and that is when Cepheus revealed himself to her and gave her a verbal lashing. Procreus left the house. After a while, Cepheus felt bad and went to the mountains, but where she went to ask for forgiveness. Eventually, they would make up for it, but in the end, after a hunting trip gone wrong, Cepheus accidentally killed Procreus with a javelin, mistaking her for an animal. Well, that is all for today. This is Mr. Brass saying goodbye and get wise.